Good day everyone and welcome to Anatomy Simplified. Today's topic is the anatomy of the tongue. I will be focusing on the extrinsic and intrinsic muscles of the tongue and then look at the innervation of the tongue. So without further ado, let's start. The human tongue has quite an extensive nerve supply. The nerve supply to the tongue is mediated by various cranial nerves, which I have now written down. So cranial nerves 5, 7, 9, 10, and 12. The tongue itself has an intrinsic part, so all the muscles that comprises the tongue itself, and then extrinsic muscles, the muscles that attaches the tongue onto surrounding structures to also help with movement and the other functions of the tongue in the mouth. So all the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles, excluding one, the palatoglossus, is innervated by cranial nerve number 12, also known as the hypoglossus. The hypoglossal nerve is a motor nerve, so it's going to innervate those fibers. The exception, namely the palatoglossus extrinsic muscle, is innervated by cranial nerve number 10. Cranial nerve number 10 is a mixed nerve, but the motor fibers of cranial nerve number 10 are going to run and then into and innervate the palatoglossus muscle itself. There are 4 intrinsic tongue muscles. These are going to allow for the tongue to move in the various directions to help with speaking and with chewing and some other functions of the tongue. So the fiber orientations gives us an indication of the name, or it deduces the name, and then it also gives us an idea of the movements that it will allow within the tongue itself. So we've got superior and inferior longitudinalis, and then we've got transversus muscles and verticalis muscles. Whereas the intrinsic muscle comprises the tongue itself, the extrinsic muscles attaches the tongue onto surrounding structures, and the structures that they attaches to is also going to give you an indication of the name of the muscle itself. So glossus, meaning tongue, there are 4 also paired extrinsic muscles. So palatoglossus is going to go from the tongue onto the palate. Genioglossus is going to go from the tongue itself to a structure called the genial tubercles located on the mandible itself. Then we've got the hyoglossus, so obviously it's going to attach from the tongue and then attach onto the hyoid bone, which is a floating bone that we see between the cricoid cartilage and then the mass of muscle on the floor of the mouth. Then the last one that I'm going to mention is styloglossus. So that goes from the styloid process, which is it looks like the heel of a female shoe. So a pair of stilettos basically. So it looks like a styloid on the temporal part or on the temporal bone rather, and then it attaches onto the tongue itself. So all the extrinsic and intrinsic muscles are innervated by cranial nerve number 12, except for the palatoglossus, and that's why I added a red asterisk on the image over here. So the palatoglossus is innervated by cranial nerve number 10, also known as the vagus nerve. Over here we've got a visual showing the pharyngeal arches during development embryologically. And we see that the anterior 2/3 of the tongue develops from the first pharyngeal arch, and the posterior 1/3 develops from the second, third, and fourth pharyngeal arches. This is going to have implications does have implications on the innervation to the various parts of the tongue. On the right side of the image, we can clearly see the posterior third and the anterior 2/3. In the middle of that is where we find the foramen cecum that clearly divides the tongue into those various portions. So an easy way to remember innervation to the posterior third of the tongue is thinking of the letter P and then reflecting it so that it starts looking like a 9. So then also for the anterior division, we think of flipping it in the in another axis so that it starts reflecting a V. And we know that V is a Roman numeral representing the number 5. Now we go ahead and we place the number 9 on the posterior third of the tongue. We then divide the anterior 2/3 of the tongue and place a V on either side of the tongue. Before going to this further, I would just like to inform you or let you know that general sensation, also known as somatosensation, encompasses the body's ability to perceive stimuli like touch, pain, temperature, and proprioception, and that is the sense of the body's position. So, the glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve number 9, is a mixed nerve, and this is going to carry the taste and general sensation to the posterior 2/3 of the tongue via its lingual branches. Now we focus on the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. So we use the 2/3 to help us to remember the innervation to the 2/3. So the 2 of 2/3 I'm going to write in, or I did write in Roman numerals, and then the third part I wrote in Arabic numerals. So now it reads 7 on the left and it reads V3 on the right. V3 is the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve number 5, while 7, cranial nerve number 7, is the facial nerve. Cranial nerve 7 carries taste sensation to the anterior 2/3 of the tongue via the chorda tympani. But now you have to remember that we said earlier in the video that the hypoglossal nerve innervates all intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the tongue, excluding the palatoglossus, which is innervated by cranial nerve number 10, also known as the vagus nerve. So how do we remember cranial nerve number 12? That's quite easy when we think that on the left side of the anterior 2/3, there now exists the number 7, while on the right side, there now exists the number 5. And 7 plus 5 together is going to give you the total number of 12. So that then is for, or it represents the hypoglossal nerve, which then innervates that region specifically. Okay, so how do we remember the innervation to the palatoglossus? So an easy way to remember it is to think of the posterior aspect of the tongue, and that in that region exists the pharynx. So pharynx, the last letter in pharynx is an X, and an X in Roman numeral represents the number 10. So for the palatoglossus, an easy way to remember the innervation is to think of the location of the palatoglossus, and that is at the site of the pharynx. So cranial nerve number 10 innervates that extrinsic muscle.